left for dead in a war zone. The alien warrior never expected a human to save her. The depths of betrayal, the methane seas of Titan 7 embraced Zara Thane like a frozen shroud, dragging her deeper into their amber depths. Her Valkorian stealth fighter, once a masterpiece of sleek engineering, now tumbled through the liquid hydrocarbon atmosphere in twisted fragments. Warning lights blinked frantically across her cracked cockpit display before dying one by one, leaving her in the eerie glow of the planet's twin moons filtering through the viscous sea. Blood trickled from a gash across her temple, mixing with the condensation on her breathing mask. Her left arm hung useless, shattered when the cockpit had compressed during impact. The taste of copper filled her mouth, and each breath sent lightning through her ribs. Yet Zara felt a strange peace settling over her like a familiar cloak. This was how it should end. A warrior of the Valkorian Confederacy died in battle, not from age or illness in some sterile medical facility. The reconnaissance mission had been a trap. She'd realized that when the human defense grid had locked onto her supposedly invisible craft. Someone had sold her flight path to the enemy, but she'd gathered the intelligence her people needed about the human military buildup on Titan 7's outer moons. Her death would have meaning. The cockpit groaned under the increasing pressure as she sank deeper. Through the fractured transparisteel, she watched debris from her fighter spiral past like metallic snow. Her people would sing of this moment, she thought. Zara Thane, who flew alone into enemy space and chose death over capture. The code of stars demanded nothing less. She closed her eyes and began the ritual words of passage. By starfire born, by starfire claimed. My light joins the eternal constellation. Her voice echoed hollowly in the failing life support system. A distant rumble interrupted her meditation. Zara's eyes snapped open, training overriding resignation. Through the murky liquid, she could make out the harsh illumination of artificial lights cutting through the depths. A salvage vessel, massive and ungainly, descended toward her position with the grace of a falling asteroid. Her heart sank further than the methane sea could pull her. To be rescued would be worse than death. It would be dishonor. A Valkorian warrior who allowed herself to be saved had failed the most fundamental test of their culture. She would become Shatar, the fallen one cast out from society. Her name struck from the honor rolls. The salvage ship's mechanical arms extended like the limbs of some deep-sea predator, reaching for her fighter's wreckage. Zara pressed herself against her pilot's seat, as if she could will herself invisible. Let them take the debris and leave. Let her sink in peace. But the ship's pilot had sharper eyes than she'd hoped. The main spotlight swiveled and locked onto her cockpit, bathing her in harsh white radiance. She could see the human pilot now through the salvage vessel's viewports, a Kjar, weathered man with graying hair and oil-stained coveralls, his face grim with concentration. Marcus Reed had seen a lot of things in 30 years of salvage work, but he'd never seen anything quite like this. The alien craft was beautiful, even in destruction, its hull a seamless blend of curves that seemed to flow like liquid metal. But it was the pilot that made him pause, his hand hovering over the controls of his mechanical arms. She was still alive. Barely, from the look of the blood on her face and the way she held her left arm, but definitely breathing. Her skin had an almost luminous quality, pale blue-white like starlight, marked with darker patterns that might have been natural coloration or some kind of ritual scarring. Her hair, visible through her damaged helmet, was the deep violet black of space itself. Most salvage operators would have left her. Alien survivors were complicated, political nightmares that brought military attention and awkward questions. But Marcus had been a medic before he'd become a salvager, and some instincts never died. He opened a communication channel, broadcasting on standard frequencies. Alien vessel, this is Marcus Reed aboard the salvage ship Greywind. I'm reading life signs. Hold tight, I'm coming to get you. Inside her sinking cockpit, Zara heard the transmission and felt her spirit crack like her fighter's hull. The human was going to save her. She would live, but she would live in shame. She tried to respond, to tell him to leave her to die with honor. But her communications array had failed in the crash. The Greywind's salvage arms moved with surprising delicacy, carefully extracting the cockpit section from the main wreckage. Marcus had to work fast, His sensors showed the alien's life support was failing, and the crushing pressure of Titan 7's depths would finish what the crash had started if he didn't get her aboard soon. Minutes later, the airlock cycled and Marcus found himself face to face with his unexpected cargo. Up close, the alien woman was even more striking. She had to be Valkorian. He recognized the species from military briefings, though he'd never seen one in person. They were the Confederacy's elite scouts and assassins, renowned for their skill and their rigid honor code. She was conscious, but barely, her breathing shallow and labored. When she saw him approaching with a medical kit, her eyes, a brilliant gold that seemed to hold flecks of actual starlight, fixed on him with an expression of such profound anguish that it stopped him cold. "Why?" she whispered in accented standard, her voice like wind through crystal. "Why did you not leave me to die?" Marcus knelt beside her, already running his scanner over her injuries. 3 broken ribs, possible internal bleeding, definitely a concussion, and that arm would need surgical attention, because you were dying, he said simply, as if that explained everything. "I was meant to die." Her voice carried a weight of grief that had nothing to do with physical pain. "You have doomed me to dishonor." Marcus paused in his examination. He'd heard about Valkorian honor culture, their belief that death in battle was the highest achievement, that to be saved was to be shamed. It had always struck him as unnecessarily harsh, but he'd never had to confront it face to face. "Maybe," he said, returning to his work with steady hands, "but alive and dishonored beats dead and honored in my book. We can argue philosophy after I keep you from bleeding out." Zara wanted to argue, to explain why he was wrong, why he'd stolen something precious from her. But the sedative he'd administered was already pulling her under, and the steady competence of his hands working to heal her injuries spoke of a different kind of honor, one that valued life over glory. As consciousness faded, her last thought was a question that would haunt her dreams. What did honor mean to a species that would risk everything to save a stranger? The gray wind rose through Titan 7's methane seas, carrying 2 beings whose fates had become unexpectedly intertwined. In the depths below, the remains of Zara's fighters settled into the seabed, taking with them the certainty of who she had been and leaving only the terrifying question of who she might become. Above them, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small drama playing out in the ship's medical bay, where a human salvager worked to save the life of a warrior who no longer knew if she wanted to live. The price of honor. 3 days drifted by in the sterile quiet of the gray wind's medical bay, punctuated only by the steady hum of life support and the occasional groan of the ship's aging hull. Zara Thane existed in a haze of pain medication and bitter self-reflection, her body healing while her spirit withered like a flower cut from its roots. Marcus checked on her regularly, professional and efficient. He'd reset her arm with the skill of someone who'd done field surgery in worse conditions, treated her internal injuries with a combination of human medical technology and careful adaptation for Valkorian physiology. He never spoke of her shame, never mentioned the dishonor she'd brought upon herself by living. For that small mercy, she almost felt grateful, then hated herself for the weakness of that gratitude. On the 4th morning, she was strong enough to sit up when he entered with his usual tray of nutrient supplements and medication. This time, however, he also carried a steaming cup of something that smelled like home. "Catherian tea," he said, setting it beside her bed. "Had to synthesize it from your blood chemistry readings. Probably tastes like industrial solvent, but I figured you might want something familiar." Zara stared at the cup, her throat tight. No human should have known about Catherian tea, the ceremonial drink shared among Valkorian warriors before battle. The fact that he'd taken the time to research and create it for her was either an act of profound kindness or calculated manipulation. "Why?" she asked, the question that had haunted her since the rescue. "Why save me? You could have salvaged my fighter's technology and left me to die with honor. The military applications alone would have made you wealthy." Marcus settled into the chair beside her bed, his weathered face thoughtful. "You want the honest truth? At first it was just instinct. I was a combat medic for 12 years before I became a salvager. You see someone dying, you help them. Simple as that. He paused, studying her face. But after I learned who you were, what saving you meant to your people, I almost regretted it. The admission surprised her. Most humans she'd encountered were either aggressive or condescending. Marcus was neither, just brutally honest. Then why didn't you? She began, but he held up a hand. Because I lost someone once. Someone who should have lived but died because of honor and duty, and all those pretty words we use to justify watching people suffer. His voice carried old pain, carefully contained but never truly healed. My son Davidon. He was a pilot too, flew fighters in the Centauri campaigns. Got shot down over a contested moon, crashed in territory we couldn't reach. Zara found herself leaning forward despite herself. What happened? He was alive in the wreckage. We could hear him on the emergency channel for 6 hours, calling for help. But command said the rescue mission was too risky. That we couldn't risk a squadron to save one pilot. They called it acceptable losses. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. He died alone in that cockpit while we listened from orbit, and they gave him a medal for it. Called him a hero. The silence stretched between them, heavy with shared understanding of loss and the arbitrary cruelty of war. I'm sorry, Zara whispered, and meant it. So when I found you dying in that cockpit, all I could think about was Davidon. Maybe I couldn't save my son, but I could save someone else's daughter, even if she happened to be the enemy. Before Zara could respond to this revelation, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Marcus was on his feet immediately, his manner shifting from reflective to urgent. What is it? Zara demanded, struggling to rise despite the protests of her healing ribs. Marcus was already at the wall console, his face grim as he read the sensor data. Valkorian patrol ship. Fast attack cruiser, coming in hot, they've got us targeted. Zara's blood turned to ice in her veins. She knew what this meant. Her people had found her. But instead of rescue, this would be judgment. The Valkorian military had only one response to warriors who allowed themselves to be captured or saved: execution for treason and cowardice. They're hailing us, Marcus said, his hand hovering over the communication controls. What do I tell them? Nothing, Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. They're not here to rescue me. They're here to execute me for failing to die with honor. The main viewer flickered to life, revealing the bridge of the Valkorian cruiser. Commander Vex stood at the center, his pale blue skin marked with the ritual scars of a decorated officer. His golden eyes, so similar to Zara's own, held no warmth, only cold judgment. Human vessel. Vex's voice carried the authority of absolute certainty. You are harboring a traitor to the Valkorian Confederacy. Surrender Scout Zara Thane immediately, and you will be permitted to leave this system alive. Marcus glanced at Zara, then back at the screen. Commander, I'm Marcus Reed, captain of the salvage vessel Greywind. The woman aboard my ship is wounded and under medical protection, according to the Galactic Geneva Conventions. Vex's expression didn't change. Zara Thane is Shatar, fallen, dishonored, no longer Valkorian. Your human laws do not apply. You have 60 seconds to comply. The channel closed, leaving them in tense silence. Zara felt the weight of her shame pressing down, like Titan VII's crushing depths. Everything she had been, everything she had worked for, reduced to a single word. Shatar. Well, Marcus said with forced lightness. That went about as well as expected. Got any ideas? Zara looked at him, this human who had saved her life, who had shared his deepest pain with her, who now faced death because of her dishonor. That moment, something crystallized in her mind. The honor code she had lived by all her life suddenly seemed smaller, more brittle than she had believed. There's an escape pod, she said quietly. You could eject me and tell them I died from my injuries. They'd scan the pod, confirm my life signs were fading, and leave you alone. Marcus stared at her. You're suggesting suicide. I'm suggesting honor, she replied, but the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. No. Marcus's voice was flat, final. I didn't pull you out of one death just to let you choose another. There has to be another way. There isn't. Zara's composure cracked, revealing the anguish beneath. Don't you understand? I am Shatar now. I have no place in the universe, no purpose, no honor. Bullshit. Marcus's sudden vehemence surprised them both. You think honor is dying at the right moment? You think courage is only found in battle? I watched you take command when those Kraos enforcers were hunting us in the story you told me about your training. You saved both our lives with quick thinking and tactical skill. That's not the action of someone without honor. Zara stared at him, something shifting deep in her chest. That was different. That was survival. That was choosing to live for something bigger than yourself. That was choosing to make your life mean something instead of just ending it dramatically. Marcus moved closer, his brown eyes intense. Your people's honor code, it's not about honor at all. It's about fear. Fear of living with complexity, with moral ambiguity, with the messy business of actually making choices. Before Zara could respond, the ship shuddered under weapons fire. Commander Vex had grown impatient. Final warning, human. His voice crackled over the comm. Surrender the traitor or face the consequences. Zara looked at Marcus, this stubborn human who refused to let her die, who had shown her a different definition of courage. She thought of his son Davidon, who had died alone because duty and acceptable losses mattered more than one life. She thought of her own people, who would execute her for the crime of surviving, and she made a choice. Commander Vex, she said, activating the communication channel before Marcus could stop her. This is Scout Zara Thane. The Valkorian commander's face appeared on screen, his expression cold with righteous anger. Shatar, you shame yourself further by speaking. I shame myself by hiding, Zara replied, her voice growing stronger with each word. You call me fallen for accepting salvation, but what honor is there in dying uselessly? What courage in choosing the easy path of death over the hard path of living with consequence? Vex's eyes narrowed dangerously. You dare question the code of stars? I dare to question a code that values death over life, that calls sacrifice, honor, and abandons wisdom for pride. Zara stood, ignoring the pain in her ribs, her presence filling the small medical bay with sudden authority. This human risked his life to save mine, not for profit or advantage, but because he values life itself. If that makes me Shatar in your eyes, then I accept that judgment. But I will not accept that it makes me without honor. The silence that followed stretched like a held breath. Then Vex spoke, his voice like winter wind through crystal caves. You are no longer Valkorian, Zara Thane. You are dead to your people, your name struck from all records. But he paused, something flickering in his golden eyes. Perhaps there is wisdom in what you say. Perhaps our code has grown too rigid, too brittle to bend without breaking. The channel closed. Moments later, the Valkorian cruiser's engines flared to life, carrying it away into the starfield, leaving the gray wind alone in the vast dark. Zara sank back onto her medical bed, emotionally and physically exhausted. Marcus was staring at her with something like awe. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen, he said slowly, or the most foolish. Both, probably, Zara admitted. A smile, the first genuine smile she'd worn since her rescue, tugged at her lips. But I think I'm beginning to understand what honor really means. Yeah? What's that? Living for something worth dying for, making choices that matter, even when they're hard, saving someone not because they're your people or your species, but because they're someone. She looked at him, this gruff human salvager who had become her unlikely savior and teacher. Thank you, Marcus Reed, for showing me that there are many ways to be brave. Outside the medical bay's small viewport, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, no longer indifferent observers but witnesses to a small transformation. A warrior learning that sometimes the greatest courage lies, not in how you die but in how you choose to live. The gray wind set course for the outer rim, carrying two beings who had found in each other proof that honor transcends species, and that the truest strength sometimes comes from accepting help when you need it most. In the depths of space, Zara, Thane, no longer Valkorian, not yet fully human but entirely herself, began the long journey of discovering who she might become when freed from the weight of who she had been expected to be.